Chancellor Rishi Sunak needs to extend the furlough scheme before gradually phasing it out, or he risks creating mass unemployment in his budget next month. That's the key message in a new report. It's out today from think tank the Resolution Foundation. They're also calling on Sunak to deliver targeted job creation support in some other sectors, alongside their rather worrying findings about long-term unemployment and long-term furlough. In this video, I'm looking at the key findings and proposals from the Resolution Foundation as pressure grows for Chancellor Rishi Sunak to boost job support in his budget on the 3rd of March. Hi everyone, I'm Bamford, a chartered financial planner, personal finance YouTuber and money author. On this channel, I talk about personal finance, investing and happiness. I make these videos to help you become wealthier and happier. If that sounds like a great result, click on that little red subscribe button, become part of our subscriber community. It's completely free and you'll never miss an episode. With the furlough scheme coming to an end in April, a think tank is encouraging the government to gradually phase out support or risk mass unemployment. According to the Resolution Foundation, Chancellor Rishi Sunak should set out in his budget statement next month an approach which lessens the impact of the scheme ending. The foundation revealed that nearly 2 million workers are either long-term unemployed or long-term fully furloughed. The amount of this long-term unemployment and long-term furlough highlights the scale of lasting damage with which the UK labour market is going to have to contend. The research, called Long COVID in the labour market, which is supported by the Health Foundation, looks at the state of UK employment during this latest national lockdown, as well as the cumulative impacts of the pandemic to date. The report also considers the prospect for employees as we look at the months ahead when the economy hopefully starts to recover. According to the report, the number of workers on the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, or furlough, has risen to around 4.5 million during this current lockdown. That level is around half of its peak of 9 million during the first national lockdown last year, suggesting that businesses are starting to adapt to lockdown conditions as the pandemic continues. So businesses apparently are finding ways to trade despite these restrictions. However, it's the cumulative impacts of the pandemic which is causing the most significant challenges in the labour market. In addition to the challenges of long-term unemployment, typically experienced during a recession, this crisis has addressed and added the challenge of long-term furlough. The report found that around 700,000 employees have been unemployed for at least 6 months as of last month in January, and a further 500,000 have been fully furloughed for that long too. Now, some employees have moved between unemployment and full furlough in recent months, which means, according to the foundation, the total who were unemployed or fully furloughed for at least 6 months has now reached 1.9 million. According to the foundation, those on long-term furlough have greater levels of financial support and a potentially easier route back into employment via their current employer. But they face many of the same challenges as the long-term unemployed when it comes to a loss of skills and a loss of earnings growth. The report found that while the economic outlook has improved, fears about job prospects do remain in place. Around 8% of employees who are currently employed either expect to lose their jobs in the next 3 months or have already been told that they're going to be made redundant. Among those employees who have been furloughed for at least 6 months during the pandemic, that figure rises to 21%. To address the impact of long COVID in the labour market, the foundation wants Chancellor Rishi Sunak to present his own roadmap for phasing out furlough support in a way that's sensitive to public health restrictions and also the sectorial nature of the crisis. The foundation is calling for the job retention scheme to remain in place for several months after all public health restrictions are lifted. That would give businesses a time to bring their staff back to work. In some sectors, they want furlough support to stay in place for even longer. Those sectors, subject to legal restrictions, that includes hospitality and leisure, are likely to require access to furlough for longer than other sectors. The job retention scheme should then be gradually phased out by increasing the minimum number of hours worked in order for furlough support to be provided. In addition, the foundation is calling on the Chancellor to provide support for the long-term unemployed by extending the Kickstart scheme into 2022. Now, by way of reminder, the Kickstart scheme provides funding to employers to create job placements for 16 to 24-year-olds who are in receipt of universal credit. The foundation wants the Chancellor to take long periods of furlough into account when deciding which workers access extra back to work support via the Restart scheme. Now, the Restart scheme is also designed for universal credit claimants, but for those who have been out of work for at least 12 months, and it offers them enhanced support to find jobs in their local area. Finally, the foundation wants Rishi Sunak to encourage more job creation by introducing a wage subsidy scheme. Now, this would be targeted at the hardest hit sectors so probably again hospitality and leisure, but also potentially retail. They also want him to raise the national insurance threshold for new starters, for new joiners, and invest directly in job creation in some areas, including social care. Nye Comenetti, who is senior economist at the Resolution Foundation, said 10 months into the crisis, almost 2 million people have now been affected by long COVID in the labour market, having not worked for at least 6 months. And while the UK's economic prospects are finally looking up, job insecurity remains high, particularly among those who have spent long periods not working or who are currently furloughed. The Chancellor must use his budget to set out his own roadmap for phasing out the furlough scheme gradually and in a way that acknowledges where the risks of rising unemployment are highest in sectors like hospitality. This would keep a lid on rising unemployment and encourage firms to bring back existing workers, while tax breaks on hiring could help more people to move jobs too. As an employer myself, I agree with the foundation that additional support is going to be needed if we're able to stave off massive unemployment later this year once the existing furlough scheme comes to an end. Last month, the Independent Office Budget Responsibility forecast that UK employment will reach 2.6 million by the middle of this year, and there's a similar prediction from the Bank of England, who see unemployment peaking at 7.7% between April and June this year. The reality is many businesses are just not in a financial position to bring staff back off furlough at the end of April. As we saw from previous furlough scheme end dates, because it's been extended a few times now, employers just cannot make staff redundant at the end of a furlough scheme. That process takes several weeks, even months, so the process has to be started earlier. Even when the economy reopens, it's going to take time for businesses to ramp up their activity levels again, to get themselves into a stable financial position where they can sustain employment. Something else I think we need to see Rishi Sunak announce in his budget next month is another round of bounce back loans. So those for micro businesses that maxed out their borrowing under that scheme the first time around. They need cash in the bank. But fundamentally, most important here is certainty, as far as certainty can be provided. That's why I believe that Boris Johnson's roadmap, being announced next Monday, is just as important as any financial support announced for businesses in the budget. Businesses need to be able to plan confidently for the future. They can't make plans, invest money, hire staff, etc. if there's a risk of another national lockdown or further restrictions on their trade. We're starting to see some signs this week that the roadmap is likely to be risk-based. Those signs include the movement of nearly 2 million more people into the clinically vulnerable category, being advised by their GPs to shield to protect their own health, but also news of mass testing once schools return, with a suggestion on the front page of one newspaper today that parents will be asked to administer COVID tests twice a week at home for secondary school-aged children. The UK economy cannot afford to enter another lockdown. We're going to need a different approach in the future to managing the impact of this virus. Excellent progress with the vaccination programme will be a valuable contribution to the ability to unlock the economy and to keep it open for businesses for the rest of this year and hopefully well beyond. But the government can no longer reasonably tell everyone to stay at home, to close their businesses. That approach needs to be consigned to history. What do you make of these proposals from the Resolution Foundation? I know some people are entirely opposed to further government financial support because it means more public borrowing, and that inevitably means paying back the money through higher taxes. I'd love to know what you think on this one. Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching this video. Until next time, I'm Martin Bamford, and remember, when it comes to your money, the more you know, the faster it can grow.